Where's Fred ready now?
Yeah, you're right.
The committee will come to order. At the conclusion of opening statements yesterday, the chair called up the Asthma Inhalers Relief Act of 2012, and the discussion draft was open for amendment at any point. And so the question this morning would be, are there any bipartisan amendments to the discussion draft? So there doesn't appear to be any bipartisan amendments to the discussion draft. Are there any amendments to the discussion draft? The gentleman from California, for what purpose to seek recognition? The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I have concerns about the Primatene Mist bill. Primatene Mist was phased out at the end of 2011 on a schedule established years ago, and it's been off the shelves for 6 months. It just seems to me if this were a drug that did a lot of good and people didn't have another alternative, I would see the logic in it. But we had testimony from the Asthma Society and the Thoracic, was it Thoracic Surgeon? The Thoracic Society, and they were against the bill. So I took time last night to call a very prestigious allergist specialist in my district. He's Dr. Gary Rachelewski at UCLA, been very active in the national organization. And I said to him, what do you think about this bill? And his response to me is he didn't think that Primatene should be on the market. He said that it's got a lot of side effects. It has a short-term impact for an hour or so. But because it's bought off the shelf, it's cheaper. And so people don't go to see their doctors. They just buy some Primatene. So they can get the impact of taking the drug. But then if the asthma comes back, they take it again. And the consequence of taking this drug several times can lead to heart attacks. And that's why he and others in the profession think it shouldn't be on the market. Now, I think the argument that it's over-the-counter is an interesting one because it's cheaper. But are we going to take the position that it's okay for people to take a drug that may be dangerous to them because it's cheaper and that's the best they can get? Or do we think we ought to have a standard that drugs ought to be effective and safe for the underlying problem? In other words, I don't see a reason to bring back Primatene Mist. It's off the market now. To bring it back serves a very important purpose for the manufacturer. They've got some inventory, and they'd like to get rid of the inventory. And then they hope that before the end of the inventory in 90 days, they can develop their new over-the-counter product. Well, I hope they can develop that and get it approved as quickly as possible. But I had a conversation with a friend of mine who used to work at the White House. And he said he was contacted by these people from Primatene, and they wanted the executive branch to give them till May of this year, because they said they only needed a couple of months. Well, I guess that didn't work out. So the drug was taken off the market at the end of last year. It's now July, so it hasn't been on the market for over 6 months. And they're asking for 9 months. Well, I guess if you can get legislation to give you more time, that's fine. And the argument I heard was that the drug starts deteriorating, so after 9 months it wouldn't be effective at all, and they don't want it on the market after 9 months. So if it's not a drug that's essential for people and may even do them harm, and I'm not raising the environmental issue, because I would put the environmental issue aside if it's a drug that people needed. But if it's a drug that people think they need and it's going to do them harm, and there are alternatives, yes, more expensive, but nevertheless alternatives, that don't have the side effects that could be very serious. Heart attacks are considered pretty serious side effects. Then if it weren't for that, I would say go ahead with it. But I don't understand the rationale for this, or I've heard the rationale, and I just can't accept it. I like the lobbyist who's lobbying on this bill. He's a former colleague of ours, and he did a very good job explaining his client's position. But I just can't accept that this is the thing we ought to do, and therefore I'm going to oppose the bill. Yeah, I'd be happy to yield.
Thank you for the last 20 seconds. I basically agree with you, but I think a number of us, I have actual constituents who literally bought up as much as they could of Primatene Mist, and they have one bottle left, and there's nothing available to them now that they know of. And I think that's why some of us want to see the legislation move forward to say, okay, let's see what the alternatives are. But I appreciate the time.
Well, I would rather hear what the doctors and medical professionals have to say than patients who think that they ought to have this. Because that's not persuasive to me if they want to have something they think will help them and can in fact harm them. If the chair would allow, I'll yield to Mr.
Well, the gentleman's time has expired. We'll come back and give you an opportunity. The gentleman from Texas, for what purpose do you seek recognition?
Move to strike the requisite number of words.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, I wanted to give Mr. Waxman an opportunity to hear from a colleague, a doctor, an asthma patient. Look, I don't know why we have been involved in this elaborate game of hide the ball by the Environmental Protection Agency, by the Food and Drug Administration, and yes, by the White House. I have asked both agencies and the executive branch to come in to explain, and I've gotten nothing. You've seen the hearings that we've had. You've seen Lisa Jackson just simply ignore me. You've seen Gina McCarthy burst into derisive laughter when I bring this point up. I mean, what in the heck is going on here? And now we're being told, well, it really wasn't so much the CFC, it's because it's a dangerous drug. What do you mean it's a dangerous drug? It's been on the market over the counter for 50 years since I was a child. I've used this drug probably every year for the last 50 years. This is a multi-dose inhaler that's available to your constituents if they get into a tight spot in the middle of the night. No one is recommending that asthma patients just simply self-medicate and not see their physicians, but for crying out loud, when one of these attacks happens, you don't have any idea that it's coming. I had to fly into Dulles one night because of whatever reason I couldn't get into Reagan. And smoker in the car before me, I don't know, but I got tight on the way back to DC. It's what, a 45, 50-minute ride? I was able to ask the driver to pull off the freeway and find a pharmacy, and I'd just walk in and buy an over-the-counter inhaler. Problem solved. If I had had to sit in that car all the way back to DC, I would have said, you're going to have to take me to Bethesda because I can't breathe. Now, why do we do that to people? Well, I'd like to know. I would have liked it if Gina McCarthy, I would have liked it if Dr. Hamburg, when I asked her when she was here at our witness table, had told me something. Maybe Dr. Hamburg could have said, you know, Dr. Burgess, we've really looked at this and we think epinephrine is a dangerous drug and we're not going to allow it to be sold in any form in the future. Well, okay, that's a conversation worth having, but we didn't have it. I was told by Dr. Hamburg that, well, it's the new application is in the process. I don't even see why it has to be a new drug application. We're only talking about a change in the propellant. CFC is a much superior propellant to HFA, if anyone is interested. As somewhat of a connoisseur of inhaled propellants, I will tell you CFC is far better. I accept the premise that we're trying to move away from CFCs, but we're not talking about putting this back on the market indefinitely. We're talking about allowing the company that has these products in the warehouse to allow them to get into the hands of asthma patients until their expiration date. That's not a big ask. I don't know why the Food and Drug Administration has taken so long approving the non-CFC over-the-counter epinephrine inhaler. They wouldn't answer my question. I don't know why Administrator Lisa Jackson will not give us a waiver to sell what's left. To tell you the truth, I was not lobbied by the lobbyist. They came and contacted me afterwards and said, all right, we agree with you, but that wasn't the reason that I brought this up. I brought this up because this is what people don't understand about the federal government. Why do they do stuff like this to people? Why do they take away your toilet and your light bulb and now your asthma inhaler when there's not a good reason? It's simply a whim of someone who happens to be sitting in the speaker's office at some point and they say, we want to do away with this inhaler. Why? Why? If you can produce scientific evidence. When I first came to Congress, there was a big brouhaha over Vioxx. You don't see Vioxx on the shelf anymore, prescription or non-prescription. And there's a reason for that, because the FDA withdrew the application. Is the FDA in process of removing the availability of any type of over-the-counter epinephrine product? They haven't told us if they are. Maybe they ought to tell the manufacturer that's working hard to get this drug approved that, yeah, under no circumstances are we going to approve an inhaled epinephrine product. This makes no sense. And again, this is why Congress has a single-digit approval rating, because we will do stuff like this for no good reason. The folks in charge, the political folks in charge at the agencies see no reason to bother explaining why they're doing it. And at the end of the day, the poor guy or lady that shows up at their pharmacy now at 3 o'clock in the morning, hey, I used to be able to buy one of these deals. They used to be right over here by the Snickers bars. They're not there anymore. But as long as we're talking about things by the Snicker bar, if you want to buy postcoital contraception, yeah, it's right up front with the Tootsie Rolls. And what is going on here? We shouldn't make political statements with people's ability to access safe medicines that they've had availability to for years and years. The only way I was able to get any movement out of the agencies of the White House was to actually get this bill, and I thank the chairman for allowing it to come up before a markup. We've done more in the last week. We've done more in the last week on this issue than we have in the last 3 years. So I thank the chairman. I'll yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentlelady from Florida for Ms. Castro for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Chairman and colleagues. I think I have a little bit of good news, but the committee would probably need to investigate it further. I was contacted by a Florida company yesterday, Nephron Pharmaceuticals Corporation, the CEO, Lou Kennedy, Lou has written a letter to, I suggested she send a letter to all of the committee members, and so this may have arrived in your offices as well. And what they've informed me is that Nephron Pharmaceuticals will be bringing to market an over-the-counter alternative to Primatene Mist. It will be known as Asthma Nephron. Nephron is a Florida-based company in the Orlando area that specializes in manufacturing inhalation respiratory solutions, and they've in the past and other products manufactured over 1 billion doses of life-saving medication just over the past 2 years. Asthma-nephrin will provide temporary relief of bronchial asthma and will not contain CFCs. The product is going to be on the shelves in Walmart's and CVS drugstores in August. And then it will be introduced to other retail and drugstores by the end of the year. There will be, I think, committee investigation maybe. Does have the epinephrine in it that a lot of the medical community does not like. But now it does appear that there is a CFC-free, over-the-counter option that will be made available shortly, and this could be a solution. They write that asthma-nephrin will not only provide treatment to those with bronchial asthma, but will meet the EPA guidelines regarding ozone-depleting materials. It's a preservative and sulfite-free and will allow those that self-medicate to purchase at a cost-effective price. I understand the market's need for an over-the-counter medication for the treatment of bronchial asthma, and I would like you to understand that my company is providing a solution to this problem. So I'll ask unanimous consent that the correspondence from Lou Kennedy, Chief Executive Officer of Nephron Pharmaceuticals, be entered into the record. And I'll yield the balance of my time to Ranking Member Waxman.
Without objection.
Jack, but I would like to see the information.
Mr. Chairman and my colleagues, this particular company, as did all the companies involved in this area, knew since 2008 that they had to look for an alternative to the CFC that was being used. And all these different companies that make these inhalants made their move and made their investments to comply with the law. The company that makes Primatene knew they were going to have to phase out as well, and they asked for another year. 2010, they asked for another year, so they got another year to 2011, and they still didn't have their alternative. Now, is it fair to all the companies that did what they should be doing, or this company in Florida that's making a product, to see one other company that didn't comply with the law get special treatment? I want to respond to Mr. Burgess. He's worried about hearing from FDA. FDA had to make a decision whether it was essential to have this drug. And they decided it's no longer essential to have Primatene on the mist, Primatene mist on the shelves. But if you want to know the scientific view, I think you ought to be more persuaded by the host of medical organizations that oppose this bill. The American Thoracic Society, the American Lung Association, Mothers of Asthmatics. Those are people who work day in and day out with people who have asthma. And they don't want this Primatene product to be back on the market. It's not on the market. They don't want it back on the market. They think that the new drugs that are complying with the CFC laws are not just complying with that environmental requirement, but are making better products, and they don't want people to self-medicate. Dr. Burgess can self-medicate. He knows a lot about what's going on, but someone else who hasn't seen a doctor really doesn't know what's happening. They may think this drug is going to help them when in fact it's going to hurt them. And that's just, to me, a reason why we should now go and put a drug back on the market to help the manufacturers sell off the remaining inventory. I thank the gentlelady for yielding to me. And you want to
Thank you for bringing that to our,
Press to Mr. Doyle.
the gentleman's got 10 seconds.
Right. He'll get his own.
Does anyone else seek recognition to speak on this? The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Barton's recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to point out that we've got two issues here, like we said yesterday. You've got the medical issue of the efficaciousness of the Primatene mist, and then you have the environmental issue of the propellant. And at the bottom, bottom line, all Dr. Burgess is trying to do is say, this is a product that's been on the market for 40 or 50 years. He's not aware, and I'm not aware of anybody who's been harmed by purchasing and using this product over the counter. Let that product that's already been manufactured according to FDA guidelines be consumed if consumers wish to purchase it over the counter. It's not an attack on any of the new drugs. It's not an attack on any of the new propellants. It's a consumer choice issue. And as I was pointing out in answer to my question, if it is allowed to be sold, it is in all probability substantially less expensive than any of the alternatives or replacements. And with that, I'll yield to Dr. Burgess, such time as he wishes to consume.
I thank the gentleman from Texas, and I thank the gentlelady from Florida bringing the Nephron Pharmaceuticals Corporation letter to our attention. I do need to point out that it's not signed, and maybe we'd be able to get it signed by the Chief Executive Officer. But this letter makes my point. They are going to be marketing an epinephrine-containing multi-dose inhaler for the treatment of asthma with a compound that will be for sale over the counter. Now, all this bill is doing is providing a bridge. Nephron has not yet gotten the okay to sell their product. There is going to be a gap in therapy options for asthmatic patients. All we're doing today is saying no one's going to manufacture new CFC containing product. The product that's in the warehouses, and eventually those little canisters, I guess, will pop open, and the CFC will go off into the environment without having done an asthmatic one bit of good. But rather than just letting those products degrade, until we have a suitable alternative, let's allow the company to continue to distribute the product that it already has. And the company spokesman that we heard from yesterday graciously said, and we'll donate all of this money to whatever charity you want us to. I mean, they were pretty forthright about they were not here yesterday talking about trying to market a product before its availability to be sold was gone. They were simply trying to provide that bridge. The company that was here yesterday wants to make a new inhaled epinephrine product. Nephron wants to make a new inhaled epinephrine product. And if there's going to be a problem with inhaled epinephrine products, then we'll have to deal with the FDA. But this bill today provides a bridge for your asthmatic patients back in your home districts. And although we did hear testimony yesterday from a medical doctor who said she didn't like patients self-medicating, we heard from another medical doctor who said he actually disagreed with the position taken by the elites of the American Thoracic Society. The rank and file actually thought that inhaled epinephrine was good to have available to patients. So we had a duplicity of opinions heard on the witness stand yesterday. All we're asking for is for this company to be able to sell the product that it already has. We're not asking for relief that they be able to make any more CFC-containing product. What we're asking for is relief for the asthma patient who right now is going to find themselves running out of the inhalers that they bought on December 31st. It was impossible to store enough of them. Yeah, you could move your 100-watt light bulbs over a little bit and stack a few of those canisters in the shelf, but no one could buy enough to last indefinitely, and we're going to see patients run out of that product, and they need to have an alternative. Nephron is likely to be a good alternative, but how many months away is it? We've already heard testimony when we reauthorize the Food and Drug Administration user fee, that it takes them a long time to get things through the pipeline.
Gentlemen, yield for question.
Yeah, I'll be happy to yield to the...
There are alternatives on the market now. I heard the argument that they'd have to get a doctor's prescription, so it costs more, but it isn't that there aren't alternatives. And the Thoracic Society and the Asthma
Well, reclaiming my time,
said that they're satisfied with those alternatives.
Reclaiming my time, those alternatives are a compound called albuterol. I have albuterol inhalers. They have a propellant called HFA. I'm not sure what the acronym stands for. I will tell you it's not as good as CFC, but okay. I'll accept the fact that for the good of the global community and the hole in the ozone layer that I'm going to have to put up with a less efficacious propellant. The problem with albuterol inhalers is they're not for sale over the counter. Now maybe the Food and Drug Administration needs to look at the ability to sell HFA albuterol inhalers over the counter, but right now you do not have that option. A Primatene Mist inhaler on December 31st in Louisville, Texas cost about $16. I know because I bought 10 of them. An albuterol inhaler is a prescription item, and notwithstanding the physician's fees and the clinic fees to go get the prescription, it's between $55 and $65. So there is a significant cost differential just on the product, but you also have to factor in the fact that you have to go see a trained professional and get them to write the prescription, which means it's not available if you get caught some night and you haven't got an inhaler handy or a prescription handy. That's the issue here. I thank the gentleman from Texas, and I'll yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. At this time, I recognize the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Doyle, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I find the whole discussion somewhat frustrating. Mr. Chairman, was the FDA and the EPA invited to our hearing?
The EPA was invited to our hearing. They did submit testimony, and we have that testimony in the record.
And the FDA?
Was the FDA invited? The FDA was not invited.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Barton talked about there's two issues here. There's an environmental issue and there's a health safety issue. Mr. Waxman expressed concern after talking to some of the doctors or people in the field that he knows that epinephrine isn't a safe drug. But here we have a letter from Nephron Pharmaceuticals dated today, or dated yesterday, which basically saying that they're going to have this epinephrine on the market in August. So what's frustrating to me is if the FDA thinks this is a dangerous drug, how is Nephron Pharmaceutical putting this on Walmart and CVS counters in less than a month? This is the middle of July, and if I'm reading this letter correctly, in a couple of weeks, this is over the counter in drugstores and in the rest of the retail markets by the end of the year. So, you know, we have this one discussion whether or not epinephrine is a safe drug to take, and by voting for this, somehow we're putting people at risk, when the agency that's charged with protecting us and our constituents seems to me has just approved another epinephrine drug to go on to the shelves in a couple weeks. So you know, I've been here long enough to watch experts sit in front of us and say completely different things about the same subject. And not being a doctor myself, you know, one has to wonder which one you want to believe, but I would like to believe that the Food and Drug Administration is the agency that I count on to protect my constituents. And apparently, they see epinephrine differently than some doctors do, because they have just approved another epinephrine drug to hit the markets in a couple of weeks. So that's issue number one. The environmental part of it, I think we all get. CFCs, they're gone. There's a couple left here in this Primatene mist, but we know that's not going to be done in the future. That's on its way out. And Primatene mist has got an application in front of the FDA for an HFA dispenser for the drug. And I don't know where that is in the process, but I've heard nothing from the FDA to suggest that this is dangerous and should be taken off the market. I'd vote against this in 2 seconds if I thought it was dangerous. But it sure would have been nice to hear something from the FDA. I mean, they know what's going on in this committee. I would love to, I mean, if you know, this is a subcommittee markup. If between subcommittee and full committee, the FDA contacts this member or anyone else on this committee and says, hold up, guys, we're not going to approve this epinephrine anymore. We think it's a danger to your constituents. I guarantee you it's not getting out of the full committee markup because a lot of us aren't going to take a vote like that. But I think, you know, you know, you hear these arguments about it's dangerous, and now we hear, well, the FDA doesn't think it's dangerous, and then it's like, well, they knew they weren't going to be able to use CFCs anymore, and I don't know at what point they stopped production or any of that. But if there's going to be a gap, you know, if there's going to be a gap in people's ability to access it, then I think that it's not unreasonable to address the gap. Now, I don't know how soon. I mean, if this is coming on the market in 2 or 3 weeks, maybe there isn't a gap. But let's get past this idea that we're voting to put something dangerous into. I mean, I don't think there's a member on this committee that wants to approve any dangerous medicine to their constituents. And if it is, I'm asking the FDA, hopefully, you know, they're tuned into this hearing, to tell us before the full committee markup whether they have concerns about epinephrine and whether or not they're going to approve any more epinephrine drugs for the treatment of asthma. I'm not a physician. I don't know. And I'd appreciate hearing that.
I think you've made an excellent point, and it really raises a serious question in all of our minds. Is it epinephrine that's a problem? Or is it the Primatene, which was sort of a grandfathered-in drug and therefore didn't stand the scrutiny of FDA? I think we ought to we can pass the bill out of subcommittee, but before we take up in full committee, perhaps the chair would say, we'll bring in FDA and let them tell us what the situation is.
I think that's reasonable.
Important and useful information.
Gentleman's time has expired. Chair will recognize himself for 5 minutes. While we did not invite FDA here as a witness per se, we have had conversations with them, and as Mr. Doyle's indicated, there is no indication by FDA that there's any sort of movement being made to ban epinephrine from the marketplace. I think many people, all of us know people who have asthma. I have many people in my family who have asthma. They use this Primatene mist primarily as a security blanket in the case of emergencies. So we're talking about one company that has like 1 million units in storage. If this bill passes, they will be able to get that to the marketplace. They're not going to make any profit out of it. They're going to contribute it to charity. Once that supply is gone, it's over with. And I'm delighted that Ms. Castor brought to our attention this company in Florida that is coming up with a non-prescription substitute. And she said in August it'll be in some Walmart, some CVS, and then by the first of the year, 2013, hopefully it'll be distributed nationwide. So I don't think there...
Chairman, yield for question?
I'd be happy to yield.
I think that I understand your thinking on this issue, but FDA can enlighten us on what their scientific view is, because if epinephrine is not a problem and they're going to approve new epinephrine products, why won't they let Primatene stay on the market? That's a real legitimate question. Second question is, I'd want to know if people go out and buy Primatene because in 9 months it may not be available. The company's representative told me that the reason they selected 9 months is that after 9 months the product is no longer effective. Well, what about those people who run out and buy it and they save it for several months and then use it after that 9-month period? What's the impact of that? I think a lot of people would want to know. Those are the kinds of questions that I think we could ask FDA. I don't think it'd be all that burdensome to have a hearing with FDA's representatives to give us this information so we can all know what to say to our constituents, not just to vote on this bill, but when they ask us these questions. So I would score the request, and
I would
hope you'll consider it.
I would reclaim my time and simply say it's been on the market for 40 years. There's been no indication that there's anything dangerous or detrimental to this.
Mr. Chairman, how can you say that when the Asthma Society and the Thoracic Society says there's dangers? You know, I heard Mr. Barton say he's never heard of anybody who had a problem. Obviously, people in the field who are specialists in this area have seen problems.
Well, if you remember when the other physician who was here testifying in support of this asked her for scientific evidence, she said there was no scientific evidence of her position. I mean, it's her experience. And even she indicated they have a pilot program in Durham, North Carolina, to distribute this material on a non-prescription basis at times. I'm going to yield back balance of my time. Is there, well, I have to go back over here. Is there anyone on this side of the aisle?
Mr. Chairman. Mr.
What
Chairman.
purpose did the gentleman seek recognition?
I asked to strike last word.
The gentleman is recognized 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I am sitting and really listening to both sides of the debate. And I must say that both sides have some legitimate points that are well taken. But I would venture to say that I probably have more or as many asthmatic, if not more, certainly as many asthmatics in my district as any other district in the nation. And I am not going to decide my position on this, how I vote for this, based on the scientific issues that have been addressed, nor based on the safety issues that have been addressed. Although I believe that both of those issues are cogent issues, and those are issues that we certainly need to consider as we move forward. I, in fact, would like to ask the FDA certain questions regarding the safety of epinephrine and other questions that I might have. But to me, it's not a question of science nor safety, but of survival. And I just look, and in a perfect world, we will, all citizens will have equal access to professional medical care in a perfect world, all right? But I'm here to say that the world that I represent is not a perfect world. Access to professional care is a dire need and necessity. It's a gaping hole in getting access to professional medical care, and for many of those in my district, far too many. As a matter of fact, my state legislature, in order to balance the budget in the state of Illinois, cut $1.9 billion out of the Medicaid program. Now, that's on top of the inequities, the lack of access that we already face. Primatine might not be, and I know listening to testimonies on both sides is not the permanent solution. But right now, I'm looking for immediate survival. I think that this bill is not a perfect bill, and I would like to ask through the chair the sponsor of the bill whether or not he's open to friendly amendments to this bill before we reach the full committee, because I like to amend the bill with some something that I think will be more palatable and provide at least a level of comfort to myself as we move forward. So, Mr. Chair, I just through the chairman, I would like to ask the proponent of the bill whether or not he's amenable to working with my staff to come up with some ideas that I might have that will help make this bill more palatable.
Well, I'm not going to speak for Dr. Burgess, and I'll let him say, but we certainly would work with the gentleman, and the gentleman would have every opportunity at full committee to offer an amendment. But since you directed the question to Dr. Burgess, would you be willing to work with Mr. Rush to consider his concerns?
Sure, the lines of communication are always open, but I would just point out that we've been trying for well over a year to get the attention of the federal agencies on this issue. We tried to get some activity before the ban actually went into effect on January 1st, and I got stonewalled by both the Food and Drug Administration and the Environmental Protection Agency and the health czar down at the White House when I asked for direct help, direct intervention by the President of the United States. So I am not willing to delay the vote on this bill in subcommittee today, but I do recognize there's time between the subcommittee and the full committee markup, and obviously the gentleman
Mr. Chairman, if I
knows
reclaim
my
my
office is
time,
willing to
it's
talk
running
to
out.
staff.
I just want to say that, you know, I feel as though during this whole entire process that me and my staff, we've been stonewalled by not only the FDA, we have had no communication with your staff, nor have we had any communication with the manufacturers of Primatine or anybody else regarding this particular issue. So, but I would just respectfully request that you be open to ideas that might be that we might have that could help make this bill a little bit more a better bill before the full committee.
Well, gentlemen's time's expired, and I certainly would commit that our staff on the subcommittee and full committee would be happy to sit down with your staff to listen to suggestions that you might make and work from there. If there is no further discussion, I would like to have a vote on this bill, and I would ask all those in favor of reporting the bill out of subcommittee would signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the discussion draft is favorably reported. The chair now would call up the U.S. Agricultural Sector Relief Act of 2012 and ask the clerk to report.
Discussion draft to ensure the viability and competitiveness of the United States agricultural sector.
Without objection, the first reading of the discussion draft is dispensed with, and it will be open for amendment at any point. So ordered. Are there any bipartisan amendments to the discussion draft? Are there any amendments to the discussion draft? For what purpose does the gentlelady from California seek recognition? Well, would the clerk report? We can do. Okay. Any gentlemen, would the clerk disperse, give out.
Can we, Mr. Terry, could we have the number of your amendment, please?
003, yeah. And the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The purpose of the U.S. Agricultural Sector Relief Act is to provide relief from American farmers who still continue to have a need for methyl bromide for certain critical uses. The central issue for American farmers is that for certain uses like cultivation of strawberries or tomatoes or peppers or eggplant or flowers or at food storage facilities, there are not effective alternatives to methyl bromide. The development of viable alternatives takes significant time and research. In the past, the U.S. has sought critical use exemptions to conduct research. Researchers use methyl bromide to test their trials for comparison against alternative fumigant and to test emission reduction methodologies. The USDA's National Institute for Food and Agriculture methyl bromides program currently requires that methyl bromide be included in its research projects. Although the U.S. has submitted critical use exemption requests for methyl bromide alternatives research in the past, in 2012, it was not included. My amendment would simply direct the EPA to take action to ensure that sufficient quantities of methyl bromide are available for continuing research on methyl bromide alternatives for the agriculture sector. This will help facilitate development of viable alternatives and advance the objectives of the Montreal Protocol Treaty. I urge my colleagues to
Gentleman yield.
Sure.
This amendment is without controversy, and I want to join you in supporting the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member Waxman. Yield back.
The gentleman's amendment is accepted. The chair has an amendment at the desk. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. We still should vote on the amendment. I believe in Mr. Waxman's influence so much that when he said it's okay, I assumed it was okay. But those in favor of the amendment of the gentleman from Nebraska will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. Now, the chair will recognize himself for the purpose of offering an amendment, and it's amendment number 101. And I would ask the clerk to distribute the amendment.
Amendment to discussion draft, U.S. Agricultural Sector Relief Act of 2012, offered by Mr. Whitfield of Kentucky.
Without objection, I'd ask that the reading of the entire amendment be dispensed with, and I recognize myself for 5 minutes to explain the amendment. The purpose of the Agricultural Sector Relief Act is simply to provide relief to American farmers. We heard yesterday from farmers from Michigan, from Florida, from California that grow strawberries, that grow all sorts of fruits and vegetables, flowers, and we want to ensure that they have methyl bromide for certain critical uses. To achieve that goal, the bill directs EPA to continue to seek critical use exemptions under the Montreal Protocol for all approved critical uses. And the bill defines those uses to include all approved critical uses set forth in the Code of Federal Regulations of January 1, 2005. And that included a range of uses of strawberries, tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, flowers, etc. Now, while EPA did not testify yesterday at our legislative hearing, EPA Assistant Administrator Gina McCarthy did provide written testimony. And she provided some constructive comments. In particular, in her statement, she noted the bill as currently drafted would exclude any array of critical uses that were identified after 2005. And this is an important point because it is true that EPA has identified certain types of crops in locations not previously listed in the original 2005 list. And so this amendment would simply address that concern by adding any critical uses identified by EPA after 2005 that had been added to the list of approved critical uses. This would simply ensure that more recently identified critical uses are not excluded from the exemption process. And that's what this amendment does, and I would appreciate the members supporting the amendment. For what purpose, the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, this amendment illustrates how the flaws in how this bill has been drafted, because it freezes into law for all time an outdated list of approved critical uses. I think there are gross drafting errors in this bill. The bill rolls back the clock on the list of approved critical uses to January 1, 2005, and says that whatever was on that list at that time is now permanent in law. Well, the January 1, 2005 list does not reflect additions to and subtractions from the list since that date. As a result, sectors that may have a legitimate need for methyl bromide could not get it under the Republican bill. And sectors that have completely phased out the use of methyl bromide during the last 7 years would be allowed to use methyl bromide again. And for example, golf courses would once again be allowed to seek critical use exemptions for methyl bromide. That doesn't make any sense. Why do we want to encourage use of methyl bromide for golf courses when we've already successfully eliminated the use of methyl bromide, and no one's asking for that use to be restored? The amendment addresses only one side of the problem. It reflects the additions to the list of approved uses since 2005, but not the subtractions from the list. I don't understand the reasoning there. The amendment doesn't correct the fundamental flaw of the underlying provision because it still locks into place a list of approved critical uses. As a result, there can't be any future additions to or subtractions from that list. Michigan growers haven't applied for a critical use exemption since 2007. Tobacco growers haven't sought a critical use exemption in 2006. Excuse me, they sought a critical use exemption in 2006, but they didn't seek methyl bromide for 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, or 14. Well, why would we put them back in to be an exemption and encourage them to start using it again? I think this amendment and the whole bill reverses the progress we've made in reducing methyl bromide since 2005. I think that's bad policy, and I urge my colleagues to reject this amendment and to reject the underlying bill as well. Yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back balance of his time. Is there further discussion on the amendment? If not, then we will vote on the amendment. All those in support of the amendment would signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. No. In opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. At this time, the chair would ask the clerk to report Amendment 04 and distribute the amendment.
Amendment to discussion draft, U.S. Agricultural Sector Relief Act of 2012, offered by Mr. Whitfield of Kentucky.
Thank you. Chair will recognize himself for 5 minutes to explain the amendment. In the legislative hearing and written documentation we've received on this issue, it's become quite clear that the U.S. does need to continue to seek critical use exemptions under the Montreal Protocol process. We also learned that circumstances frequently change on these approved insecticides and so forth. And sometimes an alternative to methyl bromide is actually removed from the market. When that happens, it is not possible for farmers to return to using methyl bromide because the critical use nomination was already submitted by EPA to the parties under the Montreal Protocol process, and that critical use nomination had assumed that the alternative product would be available. An example of that there was how methyl iodide is no longer available and it was a substitute. This amendment would simply fix that problem, and I think that the theme of this amendment is to let's do everything possible to help our farmers, our agricultural growers, the opportunity to have high yields and compete in the global marketplace with good products. So this amendment, I believe, would fix that problem. It would simply require that when a substitute for methyl bromide is pulled out of the market, then EPA must adjust the critical use nomination to reflect the fact that a substitute that they thought would be available has become unavailable. And so more methyl bromide should be made available for critical uses. So that's the purpose of the amendment. It's very straightforward, and I would ask members to support this amendment. And I yield back the balance of my time. Does anyone seek recognition to speak in opposition to the amendment? Seeing no one, for what purpose does the gentlelady from California seek recognition? The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
I hesitated because I thought our ranking member was going to speak first, but I want to comment because yesterday we heard testimony from strawberry and flower growers, and these happen to be two very important industries in my congressional district. Both the strawberry and cut flower industries are important economic drivers in the state of California, which has one of the highest concentration of strawberry and flower farmers in the country. And in their testimony before our subcommittee, these farmers emphasize the need to make the critical use exemption process more responsive to their evolving needs, but also made clear their commitment to the Montreal Protocol and finding alternatives. They are really trying to work with us. While I'm pleased the subcommittee is taking up this issue, I'm really disappointed that we're marking up this bill so soon after yesterday's hearing. We simply haven't had enough time to fully consider both the testimony of the witnesses, but also to get input from the administration and other stakeholders and get to a solution that works for both for our growers and abides by the treaty. And that's where the crux of the issue is, Mr. Chairman. As we heard yesterday, our growers need help. In fact, I've already spoken with top officials at the EPA about this issue, and I'm going to be continuing those discussions. I appreciate that this bill is a first attempt to address some legitimate issues with the critical use exemption process, but I have real concerns about the approach that it takes and some of the unlikely unintended consequences that could undermine the very progress that we've made under the Montreal Protocol. And that's why I'm hoping we're able to work together before the bill is considered by full committee. We need to find a balanced, bipartisan solution that ensures the continued phase out of methyl bromide, but also addresses the legitimate needs of our growers and their variety of those needs. And that's why I think I want to thank the gentleman for offering this amendment. This is a very legitimate issue. It's one I'm committed to solving, and we need some sort of mechanism that the EPA in the EPA process to make necessary adjustments if a recommended alternative is removed from the market, but not necessarily just one alternative. We need to respect the fact that this is an evolving, changing science. I do share some of the concerns raised here that the amendment is drafted does not allow for consideration of all the available alternatives, and I think that's what's tying our hands by this very amendment. I'll support this amendment to demonstrate my commitment to solving the problem, but I hope that there's a commitment also on the other side to work with me at least, and perhaps others, to find a solution that's suitable for all the stakeholders. And
Gentlelady, yield to.
I'll yield to my colleague.
I thank you for yielding. I understand the intent behind this amendment. If a methyl bromide alternative is removed from the market, then the nomination for critical use exemption should be adjusted, and I doubt any of us would object to that policy. But I do want to raise the concern for the proponents of this bill to recognize that the effect of this amendment could open the door to litigation into the implementation of the Montreal Protocol, where we haven't seen litigation before, and litigation is not going to solve the problem. So I would hope that, I'm not going to object to your amendment, I just don't think it accomplishes what you want, and I think the gentlelady from California raised those points. So I think this bill needs continued work so that you don't undermine the purpose of the bill by putting everything into the courts. I think it will increase the likelihood that no one gets a critical use exemption, and I don't think growers could benefit from that outcome. Thank you for yielding to me.
Well, thank you for your comment, and I think all of us have a goal here of assisting our agricultural community as they try to deal with these issues. And if we can report this bill out of subcommittee today, I would invite any member there whose staff or individual member wants to sit down with us and go over it in more detail and see if we can perfect the bill in some way. Would look forward to working with you all to try to do that. So if there's no further discussion on the amendment, then the chair would call for a vote on the amendment. All those in favor shall signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. Are there any further amendments to the Agricultural Sector Relief Act of 2012?
Mr. Chairman.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
Strike the requisite number of words.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
The gentleman, the chair, I say this with great respect and affection for the chair. This is not a bill that's going to go anywhere, and it's not a bill that's going to help the farmers. I raised some serious questions yesterday about how I thought the bill was being handled and how it could be better dealt with. I have the fear that what we're going to have is a fine operation here in which the patient falls off the table and dies. And I don't see the legislation becoming law. I think our farmers have a legitimate complaint, and I'd like to see that complaint addressed. But the problem here we have is the way the bill is drafted. There's no assurance, first of all, that the bill is going to be signed by the President. It's going to get through the Senate. And there's no assurance that even if the bill is passed and does get to the point where it is going to be administered, we will find that the administration of this bill will mean that the U.S. government will take the requests of the farmers up to the Montreal Protocol organization and find the requests of our farmers repudiated. I don't think that that serves our interest or the interests of our farmers. I don't intend to oppose the bill with any vigor. I can't vote for it, but I would beg the chair to, in his wisdom, try and work out the concerns that exist here, because this bill has some merit from the standpoint of the farmers, but it does not have enough to convince the Montreal Protocol that even if passed, that it is going to be something that they're going to be of assistance to us in. So I thank you for your courtesy, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Dingell. And as I said, if we are successful in getting this reported out, we certainly look forward to sitting down with you all and listening to and trying to work out an arrangement that's satisfactory to everyone.
Mr. Chairman.
What purpose is the gentleman?
Just strike last word.
Gentleman's recognized 5 minutes.
I'll be real brief. You know, in teaching government history, as I did for 4 years, the process of how a bill becomes law is that one chamber passes it, another chamber may pass it. It's not incumbent upon me to move a piece of legislation thinking that the Senate may or may not pick it up, nor the Senate pass it. I have to represent my constituents, and my millers in Southern Illinois say this is a problem, and this is a problem that needs to be fixed. And by us passing a piece of legislation and then putting people accountable in this committee and a full committee, and then maybe on the floor other agricultural interests will understand whether you're fighting with them, for them, or against them. And so I relish this process, and I don't think we should diminish the process based upon whether the Senate will or will not pick it up or whether the President will or will not sign it. If we did that, we might as well not even have hearings or have bill markups. So I've been on the committee 16 years. Methyl bromide has been a problem every year for my 16 years. And until there's a credible substitute, especially for milling operations, it's still going to be an issue that has to be resolved. And for us to stick our head underneath the sand is not answering the needs of my constituents. So I appreciate the chairman's passion and commitment to move this forward. He has my full support, and I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. If there is no further discussion, the question would now occur on favorably reporting the U.S. Agricultural Sector Relief Act of 2012 as amended. All those in favor shall signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair,
I ask for a roll call vote, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman requests a roll call vote. The clerk would call the roll.
Mr. Sullivan. Aye. Mr. Sullivan votes aye. Mr. Shimkus. Aye. Mr. Shimkus votes aye. Mr. Walden. Aye. Mr. Walden votes aye. Mr. Terry. Aye. Mr. Terry votes aye. Mr. Burgess. Aye. Mr. Burgess votes aye. Mr. Bilbray. Aye. Mr. Bilbray votes aye. Mr. Scalise. Aye. Mr. Scalise votes aye. Mrs. McMorris Rogers. Mr. Olson. Aye. Mr. Olson votes aye. Mr. McKinley. Aye. Mr. McKinley votes aye. Mr. Gardner. Aye. Mr. Gardner votes aye. Mr. Pompeo. Aye. Mr. Pompeo votes aye. Mr. Griffith. Aye. Mr. Griffith votes aye. Mr. Barton. Mr. Upton. Aye. Mr. Upton votes aye. Mr. Rush.
No.
Mr. Rush votes no. Ms. Castor. Mr. Sarbanes. Mr. Dingle. Mr. Dingle votes no. Mr. Markey. Mr. Engel. Mr. Green. Mrs. Capps. Mrs. Capps votes no. Mr. Doyle. Mr. Doyle votes no. Mr. Gonzalez. Mr. Waxman. No. Mr. Waxman votes no. Chairman Whitfield.
Aye.
Chairman Whitfield votes aye.
Are there any additional votes? Mr. Green?
Mr. Chairman, can I ask how I'm recorded?
I'm sorry?
If I can ask how I'm recorded?
Oh, is Mr. Scalise recorded?
Mr. Scalise votes aye.
Okay. Ms. McMorris Rogers?
Mrs. McMorris Rogers votes aye.
Mr. Green?
No. Mr. Green votes no.
Anyone else seek recognition to vote? The clerk would report the vote, please.
Mr. Chairman, on that vote, there were 15 ayes, 6 nays.
Well, the ayes have it, and the discussion draft is favorably reported. Now, in the notice, we had indicated that we were going to mark up in the subcommittee the No More Solyndra Act. I've been notified this morning that we have like 15 amendments to this piece of legislation. And in this legislation, we are making some significant changes. We're trying to terminate the 1703, 1705 program. We're trying to change the process for those applications in the mill or in the queue. And I know that people have very strong feelings about this issue. And I made the decision that we're not going to take it up today, but we would like to delay it until maybe one day next week so that everyone will have a full opportunity to discuss their 15 amendments. And so at this time, we will conclude the markup, and without objection, staff is authorized to make technical and conforming changes to the discussion drafts approved by the subcommittee today. So ordered.
Mr. Chairman.
For what purpose the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make an inquiry. Do you intend?
May I have everyone's attention, please?
Do you intend? Is your intention between now and the full committee markup to bring the FDA in and the EPA in for a hearing?
It's not my intention to have a hearing with them, but I'd be happy to bring them in and sit down with you and talk to them about it.
But you don't think that it's necessary to have a subcommittee hearing with these two agencies?
I don't think so myself, but we can talk about it and we can see about bringing the EPA in and discuss it.
If you do bring them in, invite all the members.
I will.
And of course, if you do that, it's like a hearing.
All right.
So I don't know why not do it, but you're the chairman.
Mr. Chairman?
You're requesting it with all due respect.
Would that be like when we only had one time with the head of the Congressional Budget Office and it was closed door and no members and on the health care bill?
Thank you. I might say that on the No Solyndra Act, the mere fact that we're going to postpone it, we're totally committed to ending this 1703, 1705 program, and we will be bringing that legislation up in the subcommittee sometime next week. So without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned. Do you want for me to call FDA?
I haven't talked to them, but I just think we ought to have a hearing on the